It started with a sound no one inside Buckingham Palace ever wants to hear. The deep echo of a royal emergency alert, a sound reserved only for moments of national crisis. Phones buzzed, lights flickered, and within seconds, one whispered phrase began circulating through the marble corridors like wildfire. Something's happened to Prince William. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But what could possibly bring the future King of England to his knees? What could be so devastating that the entire royal household went dark within minutes? At first, no one outside the palace walls knew. There were no press releases, no statements, no images. Only rumors, whispers from aides, tears from guards, and one cryptic message sent from a palace insider: he's badly hurt. The situation is serious. Across London, the night air hung heavy, unnaturally still. Around 10:47 p.m., witnesses spotted an unmarked medical convoy speeding toward a private royal residence. Sirens muted, headlights off, escorted by security vehicles. It was as if the royal family was moving under the cover of secrecy, desperate to hide something that couldn't stay hidden for long. What were they protecting? Or more chillingly, who were they protecting from the truth? Inside the palace, panic reigned behind closed doors. Staff were ordered to stay silent. Phones were confiscated. Media lines were cut off. Yet for those few who managed to glimpse the unfolding chaos, the message was unmistakable. This wasn't a drill. Something catastrophic had happened to Prince William. Now, here's where things get strange. The public was told nothing for hours. Not a whisper from royal correspondents. Not a hint from the BBC, Sky News, or even international outlets known for breaking protocol when it came to royal matters. It was as if the entire machinery of British media had been silenced at once. And if you followed royal history, you know that kind of silence never happens without direct orders from above. So the question everyone began asking was simple: what was Buckingham Palace hiding? For decades, the image of Prince William has stood as the monarchy's symbol of hope, resilience, and quiet strength. A man shaped by tragedy, yet devoted to stability. But as the palace gates shut tight that night, even his most loyal supporters began to fear the unthinkable, that the future of the British crown might have just changed forever. When the first clues finally emerged, they didn't come from the palace. They came from a nurse who had worked on royal assignments before, and who, within hours, vanished from social media entirely after posting a single word that sent royal watchers into chaos. Critical. It's a word no one ever wants to hear in connection with a royal heir. Within minutes, theories exploded online. Was it a car accident? A helicopter malfunction? A targeted incident? Buckingham refused to comment. But as the hours passed, something else became clear. Key members of the royal family were on the move. King Charles canceled a private dinner at Highgrove. Princess Anne's jet left Balmoral before dawn. And Kate Middleton. Well, Kate was seen leaving Windsor, visibly shaken, with her eyes hidden behind dark glasses, clutching a phone as if her life depended on it. The last time the world had seen such royal distress was after Diana's accident. And those who remembered it said this felt eerily familiar. The same silence, the same confusion, the same tight-lipped officials dodging every question. But what if history was repeating itself? Imagine being the king, receiving a phone call that your son, the man meant to carry your legacy, is fighting for his life. Imagine the woman he loves, the mother of his children, breaking down as doctors whisper words no family ever wants to hear. Imagine Princess Anne, stoic as always, finally letting her guard slip and weeping openly in the corridor. That's what witnesses claim happened inside those palace walls. And if even half of it is true, it explains why the royal family went into complete lockdown. Still, the palace underestimated one thing: the public's intuition. People noticed the subtle changes. The flag lowered, the canceled engagements, the absence of William's name from public statements. These weren't coincidences. They were warning signs. And by the time the palace finally acknowledged a private medical matter, it was too late. The story had already escaped their control. Because behind the vague phrasing and polite denials was a truth too big to suppress. Prince William had been severely injured. But how? And under what circumstances? Let's rewind. Earlier that evening, reports placed William at a low-profile royal event outside London. a private donor dinner tied to an environmental initiative. There were no cameras, no press, just select guests and trusted staff. But shortly after leaving that event, something went terribly wrong. Within 45 minutes, emergency protocols were activated, and William was rushed to a private royal facility under tight security. The first responders were instructed to keep quiet, their devices confiscated. Even their communication logs disappeared within hours. Someone, or something, was pulling strings to ensure that the public wouldn't know the truth until Buckingham decided they were ready. Now think about that for a second. When has Buckingham Palace ever silenced an entire team of emergency responders unless the situation was both dire and politically explosive? But as the palace fought to contain the narrative, insiders began to talk. Quietly, cautiously. One leaked message suggested neurological concern. Another hinted at immediate surgical intervention. These weren't rumors anymore. They were coded cries from those inside the system, terrified of what the public might soon find out. By dawn, helicopters buzzed discreetly above the palace grounds. Blackout curtains drawn, media black vans parked outside the gates. The monarchy's most guarded night in decades had begun, and yet, no one, not even senior ministers, could confirm exactly what had happened. Meanwhile, the mood in the palace had shifted from panic to paralysis. King Charles, described by aides as ashen and trembling, reportedly refused to leave his study. Queen Camilla, who had been scheduled to appear at a charity gala, abruptly withdrew, citing family matters. And Princess Anne, the rock of the royal family, was seen arriving at the private wing with tears streaking her face. For someone known for her composure, that said more than any statement could. Then came Kate. Witnesses say she arrived just before sunrise. She didn't speak, didn't wave. She walked straight past photographers, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. But when she reached the entrance, just before disappearing behind the heavy wooden doors, a camera caught a single frame. Her eyes glistened, her lips trembled, and in that split second, the entire world knew. This wasn't just another royal crisis. This was personal. This was family. Because beneath all the titles, the crowns, the ceremonial uniforms, they are still people. And when tragedy strikes, the facade cracks. But here's where it becomes even more chilling. Multiple palace sources hinted that this wasn't a simple accident. There were irregularities, security lapses, a vehicle reportedly veering off-route minutes before the incident. One insider even claimed that it didn't look accidental at all. Could someone have targeted the future king? Or was this another example of royal pressure, exhaustion, and overwork leading to disaster behind the polished facade? The palace refused to answer, and that silence only fueled suspicion. The British public began connecting dots the monarchy never wanted them to. Why were certain CCTV tapes from royal routes unavailable? Why did one of William's security officers suddenly take administrative leave? Why did government vehicles appear at the hospital hours before the press knew anything? Every time a question arose, another wall of silence met it. By mid-morning, social media exploded with hashtags like #PrayForWilliam and #BuckinghamEmergency. Citizens gathered outside palace gates with candles. Some cried. Some shouted demands for transparency. Others simply stood there, stunned, wondering if the man they'd watched grow from tragedy to leadership was now fighting for his life behind those guarded walls. And amid the chaos, one chilling line appeared in a foreign outlet before being swiftly deleted. The prince's condition is worse than reported. Deleted, but not forgotten. Still, Buckingham maintained its carefully crafted calm. A single spokesperson issued a two-line statement. His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales experienced a private medical incident. The family requests privacy at this time. Nothing more. No clarification. No mention of injuries. No denial of rumors. Just silence, the kind that says everything by saying nothing. And behind that silence, something far bigger was brewing. Because according to insiders, the damage was not only physical, it was symbolic. William's absence left a gaping hole in the monarchy's stability. Every decision, every protocol, every appearance depended on him. Without him, the royal hierarchy trembled. Even the King's Council reportedly entered discreet contingency planning. That phrase alone, contingency planning, sent shockwaves through royal observers. It meant they were preparing for the possibility that William might not resume his role anytime soon. The weight of it all became unbearable for those closest to him. Kate's family rushed to her side. Charles canceled all remaining engagements and personally oversaw correspondence with the medical team, ensuring privacy was maintained at all costs. But through it all, one question lingered like a ghost. If the monarchy's strongest figure could fall this suddenly, what did that mean for the future of the crown? And then came the message. A late-night communiqué sent to all senior royal aides, short, precise, and devastating. The prince's condition has been stabilized, but the extent of the injury is severe. That word again, severe. It echoed through every hall, every staff room, every private residence tied to the monarchy. Severe enough that Kate reportedly fainted upon hearing the full details. Severe enough that King Charles privately broke down, clutching a framed photo of William as a child. Severe enough that, and ever the pillar of composure, whispered to an aide, "He doesn't deserve this." None of them do. No one outside the palace knew those words at the time. But now, as more details slowly trickle out, it's becoming clear, this isn't just an accident. This is a crisis of historic proportions. And yet, even in the darkest moment, one truth emerged. The royal family's bond, fractured by years of scandal, tension, and betrayal, suddenly found its humanity again. They were united in grief, fear, and love for William. But while the family gathered in sorrow, the world waited for answers. And what they would hear next, leaked from within the palace's most private circle, would turn this story from tragedy to scandal. Because as the official narrative began to collapse, a question no one dared to ask aloud finally surfaced. Was Prince William's accident really an accident at all? What if the truth was much darker? What if someone, or something, inside the palace didn't want him to return? Because as the world prepared to mourn a tragedy, Buckingham Palace was preparing to contain a secret. And that secret was about to explode. It was supposed to be an ordinary night. Calm. Predictable. Another quiet evening for a man who had learned to live with the constant hum of royal duty. But for Prince William, that night would mark the point where his life, and the monarchy itself, would split in two. Before and after. What really happened between the moment his car left the private estate and the moment chaos broke out across the royal emergency network? That's the mystery that's gripped the entire world. The timeline doesn't add up. The official reports don't match eyewitness accounts. And the silence from Buckingham Palace has only made people ask one question louder and louder. What are they hiding? Let's rewind to the beginning of that evening. The day had started with laughter. A charity dinner, small in scale but significant in purpose. William had attended hundreds before. Polished, calm, polite, shaking hands, smiling, the perfect image of a future king. Those who were there that night remember something different, though. He wasn't his usual composed self. He seemed distracted, restless, checking his phone more than usual. Some said he looked pale. Others said he'd received a message during dinner that changed his expression completely. Whatever it was, it followed him out the door that night. At 10:03 p.m., William left the venue in his black Range Rover. The same vehicle he's used for years, always driven by trusted security staff. Yet that night, for reasons never fully explained, he insisted on taking the wheel himself. That detail alone raised eyebrows among those who know how tightly royal travel is controlled. Why would a future king insist on driving, especially so late, and without full escort? Was it simply exhaustion, or something more? Minutes later, traffic cameras picked up the vehicle leaving the gated estate, heading toward the countryside route back to Windsor. Clear weather, dry roads, no reported hazards. But at 10:47 p.m., the Royal Emergency Channel was triggered. Location, just outside a restricted zone, near a bend lined with thick oak trees. The exact spot where, decades earlier, Princess Diana's memorial convoy had once passed on its way back from London. Coincidence? Maybe. But the eerie symmetry didn't go unnoticed. Witnesses nearby described hearing a metallic crash, followed by silence. No tire screech. No horns. Just one sickening thud. Then, nothing. The first on the scene wasn't a passerby or an officer. It was an unmarked security vehicle that had been following several minutes behind. One of the guards, according to a leaked hospital report, found the car crumpled on its side, engine still running, driver's door pinned shut. William was unconscious. There was blood, glass, smoke, and something else the guard never publicly described. He was rushed to the nearest private medical facility, bypassing local hospitals entirely. Within minutes, Buckingham Palace was notified. That's when everything inside those walls changed. The first call went to King Charles. He was reportedly in his private residence at Highgrove, preparing for bed. According to sources, his reaction was immediate and visceral. He dropped the phone. One aide said they'd never seen him like that, pale, shaking, unable to speak. His first words, "Is he alive?" No one could answer. Meanwhile, back at Windsor, Kate Middleton's phone began buzzing repeatedly. Missed calls from royal security. By the time she answered, her voice, calm and steady as always, cracked into disbelief. Witnesses claim she screamed his name before bolting from the house without shoes, forcing her driver to chase after her. She didn't even take a coat, just grabbed her bag, her phone, and the fear that her world was about to collapse. At that same moment, Princess Anne was in Scotland attending a private function. Her aide interrupted mid-conversation. She reportedly froze, stood up, and walked out of the room without saying a word. Within 30 minutes, her private jet was airborne. You see, the royal family may live in palaces and castles, but when crisis hits, they move like any other family, desperate, panicked, human. But the palace wanted none of that humanity shown to the public. Not yet. As word spread among senior staff, orders were given. All communication locked down. No leaks. No statements. Nothing goes out without authorization. Within the hour, every journalist assigned to the royal beat noticed something strange. Their usual contacts had gone silent. Phones disconnected. Emails bouncing back. The royal newsroom group chats, normally buzzing with gossip, went completely dark. The silence was deafening. But silence, as we've learned, always hides noise. At around 11:20 p.m., paramedics reported severe trauma but stable vitals. That's the phrase Buckingham would cling to later, stable. But what they didn't reveal was the extent of the injuries. Sources close to the medical team later described it as life-changing. And here's the part that truly unsettled insiders. One of William's security personnel was also injured, but not critically. Yet, his version of events changed multiple times in the following days. Why? Fear? Pressure? Or guilt? According to early police notes, which mysteriously vanished from public record, the bodyguard initially claimed something mechanical failed. But by the time official statements were released, that phrase was gone. Instead, the report simply read, "Loss of control due to unknown cause." Unknown cause. The two words that sparked a storm. Because here's where the timeline fractures. The crash was logged at 10:47 p.m., but CCTV footage from the nearby security post, footage that should show the moment of impact, was reported as unavailable due to technical issues. The same phrasing appeared again in a follow-up request from the press office days later. In other words, the single piece of evidence that could confirm what happened gone. Was it coincidence? Or was it cleanup? The question still lingers, haunting everyone who's followed the story since. As William was being treated, a small circle of senior royals gathered inside a private briefing room at Buckingham Palace. Charles, Camilla, and Kate was still en route. No staff, no cameras, just shock and disbelief. One source close to the family said the king's first words were chillingly quiet. "This is not happening again." That line, those 4 words, sent chills down the spines of those present. Because everyone knew exactly what he meant. Another heir. Another devastating loss. Another wound that the monarchy might not survive. By midnight, doctors confirmed that William had sustained multiple fractures, a concussion, and possible spinal injury. The prognosis was uncertain. He was conscious for brief moments, but disoriented, reportedly asking, "Where's Kate?" before slipping in and out again. Those who heard him said his voice was barely a whisper. At 1:17 a.m., Kate finally arrived at the hospital. She was ushered past security into the private ward, where doctors were performing assessments. She refused to leave his side. "I'm staying," she told them, according to a nurse. "I don't care what protocol says." But protocol still ruled outside that door. Palace staff were already crafting the official narrative. They couldn't afford panic. The monarchy was already fragile from months of public scrutiny. So, the plan was simple. Control the message, minimize details, and delay any public announcement until stabilization could be confirmed. It was damage control disguised as dignity. Yet, even as the palace spun its web of half-truths, small cracks began to form. An aide, anonymous, terrified, reportedly called a friend in the media and whispered 6 words that sent shockwaves through royal circles. It's worse than anyone's saying. Much worse. Hours later, that friend's social media account was wiped clean. Another coincidence? Or another cleanup? By dawn, only one thing was certain. Buckingham had a problem it couldn't contain. Because by then, journalists were already piecing together fragments of the truth. They knew about the convoy. They knew about the route. And they knew that something didn't add up. Too many inconsistencies. Too many silences. And the more Buckingham tried to hide, the louder the public demanded to know. When the official statement finally came, short, cold, emotionless, it raised even more questions than it answered. His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales experienced a minor incident and is receiving precautionary care. The family thanks the public for their understanding. Minor incident? Within hours, helicopters had been scrambled, and 2 senior royals were in tears. Nothing about that sounded minor. But perhaps the most haunting detail of all came from one of the paramedics, the last person to see William before the medical team took over. When asked about the scene, she paused, looked down, and said only one thing. He wasn't alone. Those words would later ignite a firestorm of speculation. Who was with him? A friend? A member of staff? Or someone he didn't expect to be there at all? Because if William wasn't alone, that means someone knows exactly what happened. Someone saw everything. And that someone, to this day, has never spoken publicly. The palace insists no third party was involved. But sources close to the investigation suggest otherwise. A mysterious passenger was treated briefly and discharged before authorities could interview them. Their name was never released. Their file, sealed indefinitely. Every attempt by the press to unearth it has been blocked under national security grounds. Which begs the question, why would a car crash involving a royal be classified as a matter of national security? Unless it wasn't just a crash. Unless it was something else entirely. What if the truth isn't that William lost control of the car, but that someone else took control of it? Theories spread fast. Mechanical tampering. Electronic interference. A decoy route. Even a staged diversion. Each theory more unsettling than the last. Yet all of them pointed to one chilling conclusion. Someone, somewhere, didn't want the future King of England to make it home that night. And as wild as that sounds, remember this. Buckingham has faced sabotage before. From within and without. The corridors of power are not immune to betrayal. And when the stakes are the crown itself, loyalty becomes a luxury. By morning, Britain awoke to headlines filled with confusion and fear. News anchors struggled to find words. Crowds gathered outside hospitals. The air felt heavy, as if the nation was holding its breath. For the first time in decades, the monarchy seemed mortal, fragile, breakable. And behind the palace walls, King Charles sat alone, staring at the early morning light creeping across his desk, whispering to himself, "Not again. Please, not again." Because deep down, he knew something the public didn't. Something that would soon unravel the monarchy's carefully protected image. Because what they found in William's car, hours after the crash, hidden beneath the seat, untouched and out of place, would raise suspicions that could no longer be silenced. And when that discovery reached the king's desk, everything changed. The following morning, London awoke to what felt like the calm before a storm. The official statement had been released, sterile, calculated, suspiciously brief, but no one was buying it. Across the city, whispers replaced headlines. Every newsroom, every journalist, every curious onlooker was asking the same thing. If the incident was minor, why was Buckingham acting like it was the end of the world? But it wasn't the statement that raised the most eyebrows. It was what happened next. At precisely 6:42 a.m., unmarked vehicles arrived at the crash site. Black SUVs with tinted windows, flanked by police escorts. They moved with military precision, closing off the area within minutes. No press allowed. No drones. No photographs. What were they looking for? What did they need to retrieve before daylight exposed it to the world? Eyewitnesses from nearby homes claimed the scene looked less like an accident investigation and more like a covert operation. They didn't even use normal investigators, one local said. It was all hush-hush. No one wore standard uniforms. They were there for something specific. That something was found under the driver's seat. According to a leaked memo that circulated briefly among palace aides before disappearing, a small metallic object was recovered, roughly the size of a mobile phone chip. It wasn't car equipment. It wasn't a tracking device from the royal security fleet. In fact, no one could determine exactly what it was. But one phrase appeared in that memo, circled and underlined: possible external interference. Now, in any other situation, that phrase might mean nothing. But when the subject is the future King of England, and the car's onboard systems show a sudden surge of power seconds before the crash, it means everything. The official line was mechanical failure. The quiet truth? The vehicle's diagnostics had been wiped before technicians could analyze them. Every record, every timestamp, gone, erased from the royal fleet system. When engineers tried to recover backup data, the servers had already been reset for maintenance. Another coincidence? Or deliberate deletion? And so, the cover-up deepened. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Kate Middleton sat beside her husband, holding his hand through the wires and monitors. The steady beeping was the only sound breaking the silence. She'd barely slept. The doctors came in and out, speaking in cautious tones. One word kept surfacing: spinal. Another: uncertain. But Kate didn't want cautious words. She wanted the truth. She wanted answers, and none were coming. At one point, she reportedly turned to a senior palace aide and said, "If they're hiding something, I'll find it." It was one of those moments where you realize that even the most composed royals, the polished, media-trained figures we see on TV, are capable of a fury that feels almost ordinary. Human. Raw. Because if this wasn't an accident, then someone had tried to harm her husband. And that's when the contradictions began to pile up. The first official police statement claimed that no other vehicles were present on the scene. But just hours later, dashcam footage from a civilian car, quickly taken down from social media, appeared to show headlights approaching from behind moments before the crash. Two sets of lights. Two vehicles. One disappears. The other, Williams, crashes seconds later. That clip vanished within minutes, scrubbed from every platform. Yet, fragments of it remain archived by those quick enough to save them. Analysts slowed it down frame by frame. The pattern of movement, the unnatural swerve, it didn't look accidental. It looked triggered. Triggered. That word stuck like a thorn in the collective mind of everyone following the case. What kind of trigger? An electronic interference device? A remote signal jam? Or was there someone else physically on the road that night? Someone Buckingham didn't want the public to know about? Because here's what makes it worse. The area where the crash occurred is lined with CCTV cameras, part of the same government system used for traffic monitoring. Yet, when the press requested footage, they were told the cameras were under repair that night. All of them, along a 4-mile stretch of road, at the exact time of the incident. When was the last time you heard of an entire security grid failing in one location, just as the heir to the throne was driving through it? It's either the most incredible coincidence in royal history, or the most deliberate silence ever orchestrated. And still, through all this, Buckingham maintained its serene facade. While the public panicked, the palace held garden meetings and routine briefings. It was as if nothing had happened. But inside those walls, it was chaos. Every senior advisor, every protection officer, every trusted insider was being questioned behind closed doors. Because if the car had been tampered with, someone had access. Someone close. Even more shocking, reports emerged that William had received multiple anonymous messages in the week before the crash. One of them, according to a palace insider, read, "You're next." At the time, royal security dismissed it as spam, one of thousands of strange letters that arrive weekly. But after the accident, those words took on a terrifying new weight. Who sent them? And how did they know? Kate wasn't told about the messages until days later. When she found out, she reportedly confronted palace security, shouting, you knew, and you didn't stop him." For a woman known for her restraint, the outburst was seismic. But it also revealed just how deep the fear had spread. Because even inside the royal bubble, trust was collapsing. Let's pause here and ask a question. If you were in their position, if your spouse, your child, or your future king had just barely survived an accident that felt anything but accidental, would you sit quietly while everyone around you denied it ever happened? Of course not. And that's exactly what Kate didn't do. Within 48 hours, she reached out to a former investigator, a man once attached to Scotland Yard's Royal Protection Unit. His name remains confidential, but insiders say he was tasked privately with reviewing what the palace wouldn't. A secret investigation within the royal system itself. What he found in those first few days sent shivers through everyone who read the report. Because among the recovered fragments of the car's system log, the tiny bits of data that hadn't been wiped, there was one impossible reading. A sudden surge in the vehicle's auto-braking sensors. Not a failure, a command. As if something or someone had sent a false signal through the car's digital control system, forcing a turn that never should have happened. Modern royal vehicles are equipped with some of the world's most advanced security software. Impossible to hack, or so they claim. But impossible means little when the access comes from inside the network. The report never reached the public. It never even reached Parliament. It was buried under classified documentation. But one phrase from that confidential file leaked to the press through a back channel. Potential sabotage event cannot be ruled out. Those 7 words were enough to ignite panic and fury. Because if sabotage was even remotely possible, it meant that someone close to the royal family had either failed them or betrayed them. Meanwhile, William's condition remained precarious. He was conscious intermittently, but in pain. Those who saw him said he looked haunted, as if his mind was replaying the moment over and over. During one lucid moment, he reportedly told a nurse, "I saw someone." That was it. Nothing more. Just 3 words, but powerful enough to change everything. Who did he see? What did he mean? When that statement reached the palace, the walls practically shook with tension. Advisors scrambled to decide whether it was confusion or confession. The official medical note labeled it hallucination due to trauma. Convenient, isn't it? Dismiss the only first-hand account as delusion, and the narrative stays clean. But the royal family isn't naive. They've seen too many accidents before. Too many convenient silences. Too many perfectly timed cover-ups. Princess and, ever the realist, reportedly confronted the palace's internal affairs head with a single question: are we safe? The answer she received wasn't comforting. It was procedural. All necessary precautions are in place, ma'am. Necessary precautions, the kind of phrase bureaucrats use when they don't want to say what's really going on. Behind the scenes, the monarchy's most loyal defenders were beginning to crack. And outside, the public grew restless. Every hour without an update fueled new speculation. Was William paralyzed? Was he conscious? Why were medical specialists flown in from Switzerland? Why did Buckingham refuse to show even a single official photo? Because maybe, just maybe, the truth was too horrifying to reveal. Late that evening, something unusual happened. A convoy of vehicles left the hospital through a back entrance. Reporters assumed it was the king. But when questioned, palace sources denied that Charles had moved. So who was inside those cars? Why the secrecy? A local resident claimed to have seen crates being loaded into one of the SUVs, metal cases with military markings. Were they evidence? Personal items? Or something retrieved from the crash site? No one knows. But what followed was even stranger. A palace insider leaked that one of those crates contained damaged equipment linked to vehicle telemetry. Another claimed it held confidential royal communications devices. Whatever the truth, the fact that the contents were removed under armed guard suggested this wasn't just about health. It was about information. And that's the thread that ties everything together. Because as the palace focused on William's physical recovery, others were focused on something far more dangerous: the digital traces left behind. Emails, GPS logs, internal communications. And within those encrypted records, investigators discovered a series of location pings from an unauthorized device near the crash site, 12 minutes before impact. Someone had been there, waiting. Was it surveillance? An inside monitor? Or something darker? A signal jammer designed to interfere with the royal vehicle's safety systems? Each possibility was worse than the last, and each one pointed toward a calculated act, not random chance. By the 3rd day, even seasoned palace aides began to whisper the words they weren't allowed to say out loud. He was targeted. Targeted by whom? That's the question Buckingham still refuses to answer. And maybe they don't want to, because if the truth involves betrayal within the royal circle, then the monarchy's walls of secrecy might finally crumble. For now, The official story remains frozen in time. A minor incident, a private recovery, a grateful family. But those who've seen the evidence, those who've read the classified reports, tell a different story. A story of manipulation, silence, and deliberate erasure. Because sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't a bullet. It's a secret. And what came next proved that Buckingham's greatest enemy wasn't outside its gates. It was within. The palace had weathered storms before. Scandals, betrayals, even tragedies, but nothing had shaken its foundation quite like this. Behind the heavy doors of Buckingham's private medical wing, silence ruled. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that screams louder than words. Machines beeped, doctors whispered, and outside, cameras clicked in the rain. But inside that room, sitting beside the still form of her husband, Kate Middleton was unraveling. She had been strong for so long. The poised duchess, the steadfast mother, the future queen. The one who smiled when others gossiped, who held her composure when the tabloids spun their cruelest stories. But now, for the first time, her mask was slipping, and the world was about to glimpse a side of Kate they had never seen before. When she first arrived that night, she'd been told very little. He's stable, they said. He's being treated. But stable didn't mean safe, and treatment didn't mean recovery. As the hours dragged on, Kate's composure began to crack. She demanded updates every 15 minutes. When a nurse hesitated to answer one of her questions, Kate's voice rose, not out of arrogance, but out of raw, trembling fear. "He's my husband," she snapped. "Don't you dare keep me in the dark." Imagine that moment. A woman who has been trained her entire adult life to maintain calm, now clinging to every word, every breath, every sign of life from the man she loved. The image of perfection, undone by something she couldn't control. By dawn, she hadn't slept in almost 24 hours. Her hands shook as she tried to drink tea. Her phone buzzed constantly, messages from aides, from family, from people offering condolences before they even knew the full truth. She ignored them all. The only sound she cared about was the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor beside William's bed. Doctors briefed her in vague terms. Neurological concerns, temporary paralysis. We won't know until the swelling goes down. But Kate didn't want medical jargon. She wanted certainty. And certainty, in that moment, was the one thing no one could give her. At one point, Princess and entered the room quietly. She placed a hand on Kate's shoulder and whispered something that made her crumble. No cameras, no public composure, no royal dignity, just tears. Real, unstoppable tears. The kind that come from somewhere deep, beyond reason or restraint. And didn't say much. She didn't have to. The look on her face said it all. This wasn't just an accident. This was the kind of wound that leaves scars on the soul. Outside the room, King Charles paced like a man possessed. His advisors hovered nearby, afraid to speak. One described him as haunted. He muttered to himself about responsibility, about fate, about how the monarchy had a curse, that every generation, one heir must suffer for the crown's survival. "It's happening again," he reportedly said under his breath. "It's happening all over again." Those words would later echo through the palace halls, repeated in whispers by staff who were too afraid to believe what they'd heard. But Kate wasn't thinking about monarchy or destiny. She was thinking about her children. How do you tell George, Charlotte, and Louis that their father might never walk again? How do you prepare them for the possibility that everything they've known, the laughter, the bedtime stories, the school drop-offs, could change forever? At 9:13 a.m., she made the hardest phone call of her life. "There's been an accident," she told George's headmaster. Her voice was calm, but her heart was breaking. She didn't tell him the details. She couldn't. Not yet. But George, ever perceptive, would later tell his nanny. Mummy's eyes looked different. That morning, those who saw her said she moved like a ghost. Her posture, normally impeccable, had softened. Her eyes, usually bright and clear, seemed far away, searching for something that wasn't there. She refused makeup, refused public appearances, refused to leave the hospital. For 3 straight days, she didn't go home. But exhaustion does strange things to a person. And by the second night, the strain began to show. Nurses reported hearing her talking to William while he was unconscious. Sometimes gently, sometimes in anger. "You promised me you'd be careful," she whispered once. Another time, Why didn't you let them drive you? Those private moments, meant for no one's ears but his, revealed the guilt eating her alive. Because deep down, Kate blamed herself. Earlier that week, William had wanted to cancel the dinner. He'd said he was tired, overworked, mentally drained. Kate, ever the supportive partner, had encouraged him to go. "It's just one evening," she'd said. "Then you can rest." Those words haunted her now. Just one evening. If only she had insisted he stay home. If only she'd been there. If only she'd known. That's how guilt works. It doesn't matter that none of it was her fault. It doesn't matter that she couldn't have predicted what would happen. When someone you love suffers, logic dies. Only pain remains. As the hours passed, her frustration turned inward. She lashed out at the palace for their silence, at the doctors for their uncertainty, even at herself for believing the official story. "They're lying to me," she told in one evening. "They're not telling me everything." And didn't argue. She'd been through this before, when Diana died, when Philip fell ill, when the truth was buried beneath official statements. She knew how the palace worked. Control the narrative. Protect the crown, even if it means breaking hearts in the process. At one point, Kate reportedly demanded to see the car, the wreckage that had been hidden away in a private royal facility. "I need to see it with my own eyes," she told the staff. They refused, said it wasn't appropriate. That only made her angrier. "Appropriate?" she shouted. "My husband's lying in there, and you're worried about appearances?" It was the moment everyone realized that this wasn't the composed Duchess of Cambridge anymore. This was a woman pushed to the edge. A wife fighting not just for her husband's life, but for the truth. That night, Kate made a decision that would change everything. She reached out to someone outside the royal bubble, a trusted journalist she'd once met during a mental health initiative. She didn't reveal details, only that something isn't right. The journalist, sensing the weight of her words, promised discretion. But Buckingham's security systems caught the call before it even connected fully. Within hours, Kate's phone was confiscated, her access to outside lines restricted. They claimed it was for her emotional well-being. But she knew better. They were isolating her. That's how the palace operates when things get messy: close ranks, limit leaks, silence the ones asking the wrong questions. And now, the woman who once symbolized unity and control was becoming their biggest liability. Meanwhile, William's condition showed small flickers of progress. He'd moved his fingers once, murmured words that didn't make sense. Each tiny sign brought hope, but also fear. Because when he did wake, truly wake, what would he remember? Doctors warned that his memory could be patchy. That trauma often plays tricks on the mind. But Kate wasn't thinking about medical probabilities. She was thinking about the last thing she'd said to him before he left that night. "Drive safe, love you." 3 words now carved into her chest like a wound. And then came the turning point. On the third day, as she sat beside his bed, the lead physician entered with a folder. His expression was grave. "We've completed the scans," he said. "There's something you need to see." He placed the images on the table, dark, shadowy shapes that meant nothing to the untrained eye. But then he pointed. "Here," he said softly. "This is where the spinal cord sustained the most damage." Kate froze. Her throat went dry. "Will he walk again?" she whispered. The doctor hesitated, too long. That hesitation was an answer in itself. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He just said, "We'll have to wait and see." That's when she broke. The strength, the composure, the duty, all of it shattered. She turned away, pressed her hand to her mouth, and sobbed. Not the quiet, polite tears of a duchess, but the guttural cry of a woman who had reached her limit. Even the medical staff stepped back, unsure how to comfort her, and later described it as the most human moment she'd ever witnessed inside the palace. "For once," she said, "we stopped being royals and just became people." After that, Kate changed. Her tone softened, but her resolve hardened. She stopped asking permission, stopped waiting for briefings. She became a force, calm on the surface, determined underneath. Every move, every glance, every whispered conversation now had purpose. She wanted answers, and she would get them. That night, when everyone else had left, she sat by William's side again. She spoke softly, as if talking to herself. "They think I'll stay quiet," she said. "But I won't. I'll find out who did this. And when I do, they'll wish they hadn't touched you." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. It was no longer fear that filled them. It was fire. And as if he somehow heard her, William's hand twitched. Just once. Barely noticeable, but enough to make Kate gasp. Enough to make her believe that he was still fighting. But if that flicker of hope gave her strength, it also gave the palace reason to worry. Because a woman with nothing left to lose, especially one who knows the system's secrets, can be dangerous. And as the dawn broke over London, another secret was already waiting to reach her ears. One that would turn her quiet grief into righteous fury. Because someone inside Buckingham had leaked a classified medical report, and what it revealed about William's injuries would confirm Kate's darkest fear. This wasn't just an accident. It was an attack. At exactly 2:45 a.m., the stillness of Buckingham Palace was broken by the faint echo of hurried footsteps, soft, precise, and deliberate. A royal physician, pale and trembling, clutched a folder marked with the words "strictly confidential." His hands shook not from exhaustion, but from fear, because what was inside that folder could destroy the official story Buckingham had worked tirelessly to protect. He paused outside King Charles's private quarters. 2 guards nodded grimly and stepped aside. The physician took a deep breath, straightened his coat, and entered. The king was awake, sitting in the dim light, staring blankly at an old photo of his sons, William and Harry, laughing together as boys. The contrast between that memory and the silence now was unbearable. The doctor bowed. "Your Majesty," he began softly, "we've completed the second assessment. The injuries are extensive." Charles didn't move. "Tell me plainly," he said. "Don't dress it in royal language. I need the truth." And so the doctor did. The prince suffered severe trauma to the spinal region. The damage has been stabilized, but recovery is uncertain. There's swelling in the cervical area, near the neck. The neurological scans suggest impairment. Charles stared at him, unblinking. "Impairment," he repeated slowly, as if the word itself was poison. "Meaning?" The doctor hesitated. "Meaning His Royal Highness may never regain full mobility." For a long moment, there was only silence. The kind that feels heavy, like the air itself doesn't want to move. Then the king whispered, almost to himself, "My son, my heir." The physician lowered his eyes. "We will do everything possible, sir. But the prognosis is complicated. There are signs of internal bleeding that were atypical." That word hung in the air, atypical. It wasn't just medical jargon. It was a red flag. "What do you mean?" Charles asked sharply. The doctor swallowed hard. "The injuries aren't fully consistent with the crash mechanics, sir. The angle, the compression pattern, it suggests an impact that didn't come solely from the vehicle's structure." Charles's expression hardened. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying, Your Majesty, that something else might have been involved." Those words changed everything. Because up until that moment, the palace could still cling to the illusion of an accident. A tragedy, yes, but a controllable one. Now, that illusion was cracking. And once a crack appears in Buckingham's walls, it spreads fast. The physician left the room with instructions to speak of this to no one. But the truth had already begun its slow crawl through the palace corridors. By morning, half the staff knew that William's injuries didn't add up. The other half pretended not to. When the first light of dawn hit the palace windows, a meeting was convened, small, secret, and tense. Around the table sat King Charles, Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, and 2 of the lead royal physicians. Kate was deliberately excluded. They said it was for her emotional protection. In reality, it was to keep her from hearing what came next. The doctors presented their findings. Detailed scans, injury reports, the kind of cold, clinical data that strips away human feeling. But as they spoke, Anne's jaw tightened. She'd seen enough in her life to know when something didn't make sense. "You're saying," she interrupted, "that he has spinal compression from the rear, but no corresponding fracture pattern?" The physician nodded. "Correct, ma'am. It's as though the force came from outside the vehicle, not just from the collision." And leaned back, eyes narrowing. Then this wasn't an accident. The room fell silent. Charles exhaled slowly. "We don't jump to conclusions." But Anne didn't look convinced. "Father, they said the same after Diana," she said quietly. "They said accident then too." That sentence cut like a knife. The king's face stiffened, and the conversation ended. But the unspoken truth lingered. They were terrified of repeating history. Later that morning, the lead physician, still uneasy about the deception, made a choice that would risk everything. he decided to break royal protocol. At exactly 9 a.m., he called an old colleague, a neurologist at a private London clinic unaffiliated with the Crown. Using a secure line, he asked for a second opinion. Off the record, he said, if someone sustained trauma like this, would you assume a standard crash? The neurologist hesitated. Depends on the data. But what are you really asking? The doctor paused, then said it. What if the spinal compression pattern suggested a directional force, as if the body was hit before the car made contact? There was silence. Then the neurologist replied, then I'd say your patient wasn't in an accident. He was attacked. Those words sent chills down his spine. Meanwhile, Kate remained at the hospital, unaware that the palace was already debating how much of the truth she could be told. She'd been assured William was stable. That's all. But as she studied the monitors and listened to the doctor's hesitant tones, she began to sense something was being hidden from her. Her instincts, always sharp, screamed that the story was being rewritten behind her back. By the time she confronted the senior physician, her patience was gone. You're lying to me, she said through gritted teeth. I can feel it. I'm not leaving until you tell me what you're not saying. The doctor hesitated. Then, lowering his voice, he said, the injuries are not typical of a crash, ma'am. Kate blinked. What do you mean, not typical? He looked down. We believe there may have been external impact, possibly before or after the vehicle made contact. Her face went pale. You're saying he was attacked. I'm saying, the doctor replied carefully, it's possible someone wanted this to happen. That was the moment Kate's grief turned to fury. She stormed out of the room, shaking, whispering to herself, they did this. Someone did this to him. Aides tried to calm her. She refused. The mask was gone now. Every polite smile, every composed posture, replaced by raw anger. At noon, she demanded to see Charles. But when she arrived, she was met with soft voices and empty reassurances. Kate, we don't have the full picture, Camilla told her gently. But Kate could see the fear in their eyes. She knew they were holding back. That afternoon, a royal press officer arrived with a pre-written statement for her approval. It was short, emotionless, and carefully worded. The Prince of Wales is recovering well and in good spirits. The family appreciates the public support. Kate read it, then tore it in half. I'm not saying he's in good spirits, she said coldly. He's barely conscious. But the palace had made its decision. The truth, as usual, was to be buried under a mountain of decorum. Still, the doctors couldn't bury their conscience forever. Later that evening, one of them, the same man who had spoken to Kate, quietly contacted a journalist from The Guardian. He didn't give his name. He didn't reveal the full report. But he left one phrase that would appear in print hours later and set the entire country ablaze. A senior medical source suggests the prince's injuries are inconsistent with a single vehicle crash. That one sentence detonated like a bomb. Within minutes, headlines erupted. Social media went wild. Was William attacked? Palace cover-up allegations mount. Royal security breach suspected. Buckingham scrambled to control the chaos. Phones rang nonstop. Press aides barked orders. The king was livid. Find out who spoke, he demanded. But it was too late. The story had escaped their grasp. And in the eye of that storm, Kate's anger turned into something colder, determination. She began piecing together her own timeline. The dinner, the departure, the missing CCTV footage, the erase card data. It all pointed to one chilling conclusion. Someone had manipulated events that night. But who had the access, the power, and the motive to do it? The answer, she would soon discover, wasn't outside the palace. It was inside. But before she could act, Buckingham had one final trick, a press conference designed to smother the truth under a blanket of official updates. The following morning, the palace summoned the media for a clarification. Cameras filled the room, reporters poised with pens. Then the lead royal physician, the same man who had confided in Kate, stepped up to the podium. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and said, His Royal Highness is in stable condition. We are optimistic about his recovery. There is no indication of foul play. This was a tragic accident. He hesitated on that last line. His voice wavered. Those who watched closely saw it. The flicker of hesitation, the slight tremor. The truth struggling to break free but crushed by fear. Behind him, palace aides stood rigid, their faces unreadable. When the broadcast ended, the world thought it had heard reassurance. But those inside the palace knew better. That wasn't reassurance. That was surrender. Later that evening, the same doctor resigned. No reason given. His departure buried in bureaucratic language. But sources close to him revealed why. He refused to be part of a lie. Before leaving, he wrote one final note in William's confidential file. Patient's injuries not consistent with official narrative. That note would resurface weeks later, in a leak that made headlines worldwide. But for now, it sat locked away in a drawer deep inside Buckingham's medical archive, gathering dust like every other royal secret. As Kate sat beside William's bed, unaware of the storm brewing outside, a nurse entered quietly and handed her a folded piece of paper. "This was left for you," she whispered. Kate opened it. One line, handwritten, shaky but clear. "They know what happened, and they're afraid." No signature, no name, just that chilling sentence. Kate stared at it, her mind racing. Who wrote it? One of the doctors? A palace insider? Someone warning her? Or someone trying to trap her? She folded the note slowly, slipped it into her pocket, and looked at her husband, still motionless, pale, and fragile beneath the hospital lights. Then, under her breath, she whispered, "I'll find them. I swear it." And as she sat there in the flickering glow, unaware of the cameras being quietly removed from the hospital wing that night, a storm was already forming inside Buckingham Palace, one that would expose the monarchy's deepest cracks. Because the next morning, a whistleblower would step forward with proof that William's accident was not just preventable, but orchestrated. And when Kate saw that evidence with her own eyes, the world's sympathy would turn to outrage. The morning sun rose over Buckingham Palace with deceptive calm. From the outside, it looked like a picture of royal tranquility. Guards marching in unison, flags fluttering, tourists snapping photos against the golden gates. But behind those walls, chaos reigned. The illusion of control was slipping, and those inside the palace knew it. They were no longer managing an incident. They were burying a scandal. The call came in just after 7 a.m. A low-level aide, voice trembling, whispered the words that made even seasoned officials flinch. Someone's leaked internal medical notes. Within minutes, a digital lockdown was ordered across all royal communications. Emails encrypted, files deleted, logs wiped clean. The cover-up had begun, fast, ruthless, and methodical. To the public, the palace projected calm professionalism. But inside, there was panic. Senior aides barked orders down the corridors. Lawyers drafted emergency injunctions to silence the press. IT specialists combed through servers trying to identify who accessed what and when. Every digital trace, every login, every timestamp was scrutinized. The message from the top was clear: contain it at all costs. But the truth, like smoke, has a way of slipping through cracks. By mid-morning, whispers had already reached several journalists. The phrase "inconsistent injuries" was being repeated like a curse word. Reporters from The Guardian, The Times, and even the BBC were calling their royal contacts. And for the first time in years, those contacts weren't answering. Phones were dead, messages unread. Buckingham had gone into complete lockdown, silencing even its most loyal insiders. Meanwhile, Kate Middleton sat alone in the hospital lounge, unaware that the palace's crisis team was working overtime to erase evidence that could vindicate her growing suspicions. She was supposed to believe William's injuries were the result of a tragic accident. But deep down, she knew better, and so did they. At around noon, a manila envelope arrived at the back entrance of the hospital. No name, no sender. Inside, there was a USB drive and a single note that read, "You deserve the truth." The handwriting was messy, hurried, and the letter smelled faintly of antiseptic, like it had been written inside a medical facility. Kate hesitated for a moment before handing it to her security aide. "Check it first," she said. Within the hour, she was staring at images that would confirm every dark suspicion she tried to silence. They were medical scans, real ones, her husband's, and annotated beside them, in red pen, were comments only a professional could make. Compression angle suggests external force. Impact too localized for standard vehicle collision. Possible manipulation of vehicle control system prior to crash. That last line made her go cold. Manipulation. The word screamed sabotage. She immediately called Princess Anne. "You need to see this," Kate said, and didn't hesitate. Within hours, she was at Kate's side, reviewing the scans herself. Her reaction was immediate. "We need to speak to the king," she said. But even before they could leave the hospital, Buckingham had already intervened. A call came through from Charles's private secretary. "Her Royal Highness is advised not to discuss confidential medical information outside authorized channels," the voice said flatly. Translation: "Stay quiet or face consequences." And hung up mid-sentence. "They're covering it up," she muttered. Again. And she wasn't wrong. Inside Buckingham's West Wing, a team of crisis managers was drafting a carefully worded narrative designed to rewrite history before it was even written. Every media outlet would receive the same official statement. The Prince of Wales was involved in a low-impact road incident due to vehicle malfunction. There is no evidence of external interference. The wording was deliberate, vague enough to deflect suspicion, specific enough to sound factual. It was the perfect royal lie. But not everyone inside the palace agreed.